Hi, Raymond Moran with the V20, here today with Nick Talbot, CEO of the International Valuation Standards Council. Nick, it's always a pleasure to spend time chatting with you, and we're thrilled to have you with us. Can you give the audience a brief overview of the IVSC and its importance to the global profession?
Yes, of course I can, Ray. Thank you for inviting me to have this discussion. The IVSC essentially brings experts together from around the world who populate our boards, and they look to evolve the international valuation standards. We look to get as much input as possible from different stakeholders around the world, which is why we have things like open consultations, which usually last a minimum of 3 months, both in terms of the agenda as well as proposed changes to the standards, because we want to take the best ideas from wherever they are in the world. So in one sense, we are a facilitator, and we bring together many organizations, some government, some regulatory, some university, some VPOs, so professional bodies, investors. We have a very significant investor community, as well as obviously different types of regulators that have a strong interest in the importance of valuation for financial stability, as well as helping give confidence for international investment. We look to work in partnership with organizations in different countries, and it's really important to us to encourage good professionalism, because unless you've got good professionals in each country, then the standards are meaningless. So it's really important to have that partnership in different countries in order to reach the goal essentially of having good, consistent valuations around the world.
Nick, thank you for that. And, that's just a wonderful segue. We're very excited that this year's V20 will actually be in Cape Town, South Africa, where I believe you are at this very moment. Could you give us a brief discussion of the importance of the African continent and the Middle East, and some rather exciting news the IVSC has about that?
Yes, of course. I mean, the African continent, as you probably know, has the fastest growing population in the world currently, and it's seen as a place which is increasingly attractive to business. We have just recruited a new director for the Middle East and Africa, and he will be based in Riyadh. And a lot of this is thanks to Takim, actually, who are helping support us in this initiative. Mostafa has a great background. He's done things like worked on the biggest IPO in Egypt. He was formerly a director in PwC, looking after valuations in the region. And so we're really excited to have such a strong professional joining our team. But that's just the start, Ray. We are also exploring different opportunities to expand that team, both in the Middle East, but also from an Africa point of view. There are discussions going on with a couple of different governments and businesses who may help to support us in terms of having staffing within Africa to work alongside Mostafa. The Middle East is another exciting region. Obviously, there are some significantly developed economies, both in terms of Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and there are lots of other exciting economies in the region which are changing from a focus on oil-based economy to what we'd regard as a more normal market, a more normal economy. And fundamental to that is obviously valuation, having international valuation standards that help underpin the confidence of investors, whether they're domestic or international, as well as opportunities to help encourage a strong profession across the region. So we're really excited about being able to do more outreach, and in some ways also give a greater voice to stakeholders in the Middle East and Africa in helping develop the global approach that's of benefit to all of us.
That is exciting news, and I'll reach out to my colleagues at the South African Institute of Valuers, SAIV, to make certain we invite Mustafa along with yourself to come down to the V20. Speaking of exciting, Nick, I noticed that the IVSC is hosting with PwC an upcoming webinar on private credit markets, a really dramatically growing niche in finance these days. Can you chat about that for just a minute?
Yes, this is obviously an area that's been attracting a lot of attention. In fact, we had a meeting just earlier this week with IOSCO Committee 5, which focuses on investment from a securities regulator point of view, which touched on this. The series is going to spotlight major emerging issues in financial markets and the role of valuation professionals in navigating those developments. It's designed really to bring together global experts, to help promote stronger governance, enhance transparency, and help build market confidence through international standards. So there will be a few different webinars that complete this series, from a tech-driven valuation perspective in terms of opportunities and oversight, real estate valuation in a shifting landscape, and managing valuation risk, from identification through to mitigation. Now, you'll know as well as I do, Ray, that private credit markets are very much under the spotlight and have been for some time recently. That's partly because if you look at things like private capital assets and the management, these have tripled in the last decade. And according to the IMF, they now surpass $14 trillion globally. And private credit alone has grown beyond $2 trillion. And with that, naturally it draws increased scrutiny from regulators, including the SEC, the ECB, and the FCA. And, with growth, usually you get greater complexity, greater valuation risk, and there's really a need to make sure there's sufficient transparency and robust governance. Now, the new structures in private credit markets are making these investments accessible to a broader pool of investors, and that includes retail investors too. So not just sophisticated institutions and high net worth individuals and families, but the shift, introduces new liquidity considerations and raises the stakes very much in terms of valuation accuracy and investor protection. And when we're thinking about the role of valuation in private markets, private asset valuations rely on complex models, sometimes unobservable inputs, and of course professional judgment. And unlike public markets, which obviously, have the benefit of a greater degree of transparency and from continuous price discovery. Now, as the retail investors gain greater access to private markets, those valuations, which need to be reliable, become essential for market stability and as well as investor protection. And if you look at the regulatory reviews that have been performed by the FCA, the ECB, the SEC, they found weaknesses in relation to valuation governance, particularly around independence, documentation, and challenge processes. And we believe that international valuation standards have a role here. We provide a global benchmark for valuation governance, as well as enhancing consistency, accountability, and transparency. And if you look at our latest version of IVS, which came out last year but came into force at the end of January this year, we deliberately strengthened the guidance on data and inputs, valuation models, and documentation and reporting. And IVS 500 specifically is a specific evolution that focuses on financial instruments, and it's got enhanced guidance on things like the governance frameworks that we'd expect, risk assessment and quality control, and obviously transparency and independent oversight is another important consideration. So we're really excited about doing this webinar with PwC, and we'd encourage anyone that has an interest in this to join and tune in and listen to what the panel has to say.
I'm sure many will, Nick. In addition to private credit markets and financial instruments, the IVSC website has a wealth of information for valuers in property, plant machinery, and business valuation. Can you talk a bit about some of the things that are there from the perspectives, papers, and news columns that would be of interest to the audience?
Well, I mean, that really depends, Ray, because, our audience is very diverse. So some have an interest in financial instruments, some have a sole interest in real estate, some business valuation, intangibles. But we look to use the perspectives papers as a form of thought leadership, sometimes to provoke debate and encourage interaction with different stakeholders around the world, and to inform the views that we have in potentially evolving our standards in certain directions. And the perspectives papers we have cover a lot. I mean, sustainability and ESG factors are obviously in the spotlight right now, with some jurisdictions placing importance on them and some less so due to politics and things that are going on. But the investor community around the world, does look at those in very different ways, which makes the life of the valuer a little bit more complex. When I think about other issues that we've either dealt with or are about to deal with, the advances of artificial intelligence and other tools, have the potential to help valuers, but it's really important that valuers understand the models that they use as well, and that the models used are verifiable. But there are opportunities from technology to increase the quality of products through increased amounts of data, that sort of thing. As you know, intangibles continue to become more and more important, and some stakeholders raise questions on the relevance of the balance sheet. And if we look at activity of iiBV and FASB, that's something that they're certainly looking at right now. Additionally, I foresee a major step change in the importance of international valuation standards and professionalism around the world. But you'll have to remain tuned in to IVSC activity to see what I'm talking about, hopefully later this year.
Very exciting. You'll have us waiting impatiently, Nick. Looking forward to seeing you in Cape Town. Any final thoughts on the V20 for the audience that you'd like to share?
I mean, I think that, we're living in times of huge change and uncertainty, Ray. Investors in the environment that we're in want clarity and help to make the right decisions. And from my point of view, the role of the valuer has never been more important in helping provide that confidence. And for me, events like V20 are very important in helping to influence the development of a strong, globally recognized profession, which can give that confidence to investors. So I'm very much looking forward to being able to participate in the event in Cape Town in September.
We're very excited about it and looking forward to seeing you there. Nick, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to talk and catch up, and looking forward to hearing more about IVSC developments.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Nick.